Welcome back to our talent talks. That's gonna be our new title, like screen. That's it. Yep. All right, guys, welcome back. I'm gonna be continuing our series of leaders throughout Scripture. Almost forgot the title. And before I go any further, I just would like to preface it by saying everything that I say today is pirated from a sermon that I heard in February that I absolutely loved. It's one of my favorite sermons of the whole year, and I think it is honestly the greatest sermon that I've heard on leadership. And so that will be, the link to that video will be in the description below, or if you're on Instagram, it'll be in the comments below. And so I just really encourage you guys to watch this. If you're going to choose between me and that guy, definitely watch that guy. He's going to do a way better job. His name is Pastor Mark Johns. And so moving forward, we're going to be talking about Jonathan. And I don't know if you guys know who Jonathan is, but basically he is going to appear first in 1 Samuel chapter 18. And so where 1 Samuel chapter 18 picks up is it's right after David slays Goliath. And so Goliath was that big giant dude, and David threw the stone. We all know the story. Okay. And so it picks up right after that when Jonathan first meets David. And so we're going to pick up in the beginning of chapter 18. And it says, as soon as he finished speaking to Saul, and he's talking about David speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father. And then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of his robe and that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor and even his sword and his bow and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over the men of war. And it was good in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. And so what we see here is David slays Goliath. And Jonathan immediately recognizes that David is way better or more of the rightful ruler than Jonathan is. And so what he does is he gives him his family robe. We see this throughout Scripture. It's a symbol of you're a part of my family. So he gives him his family robe. He gives him his armor and his sword. And what I think this is symbolizing is that Jonathan's saying, you know what? You're way better to lead this army too, because Jonathan, if you guys missed this, Jonathan is the rightful heir to the throne. He's the prince of Israel. He is Saul's son, who is the king right now. And so Jonathan gives up his heir, his birthright to David. And I just think about if the throne was in arm's reach of me, would I do that? And I honestly don't think I would. And so I posed a question, and the question is, how on earth did Jonathan live for David more than himself? And I think that, and this is what the speaker, Pastor Mark Johns pointed out, that the only way Jonathan could have done this is because he had a big picture mentality. He saw God's plan as the big picture over his own plan. And so what happens, what did Jonathan's big picture thinking get him? It allowed him to see his true value. And so Jonathan was secure in his own self. He knew that God's gift to him, God's acceptance of his family, and all that God could give him was way better than the throne. He was secure in the fact that who he was, and he did not need a throne. He did not need power in order to glorify his name. He knew that the purpose was to glorify God's name. And I love this quote that he said in his sermon. It says, if you are the kind of leader that builds people up so well that the organization can work without you, then you're the leader that the organization will never want to be without. And that's such a true statement. If we're a people that builds everyone else around us, then we will be somebody that no one wants to let go. And that's what happened between Saul and Jonathan, or Jonathan and David. And we see this later on when Saul dies. David comes back and he's searching for somebody. He's searching for Jonathan. Jonathan has passed away. And so we heard from Dalton earlier this year that he found Jonathan's only relative, and that was Melchizedek. And he, gave him all this stuff, and that's a different story. But that's what Jonathan is doing. He sees the value of the organization above himself and builds David up. And so we also see this. He was able to see himself as he truly was and treat people correctly. And so this brings me to kind of thinking about different leadership roles. Not everyone is meant to lead from the pulpit or the podium or whatever you want to call it. We are meant to lead in the way that God designed us. And so God designed David to be the leader of the people. And I think about Jonathan being the person that's working behind the scenes, encouraging David and building him up. I think about the SEAL resource staff, people like Madison Ewers and Ellen and Steven and Andrew Martinez, all these people that you don't even know their names, probably never seen them, even though they're at all the retreats that you guys have been to. These are people that without them, we can't be on campus. We can't do retreats. They do so many things behind the scenes that you guys can enjoy your SEAL experience. But you never see them. They never get the glory. And so if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have anything. That's kind of what Jonathan's doing. He is the reason why David's on the throne. He's the reason. But if it wasn't for him pushing him up, and David, Jonathan had to be willing to stay behind the scenes. And this is a really cool quote that he also said in his sermon. It said, Jonathan's kingdom devotion trumped his self-promotion. Jonathan saw the big picture, saw that God's, I think I spelled devotion wrong. Anyways, saw that God's plan was to lift David up on the throne. And so he was like, you know what? The throne's at my arm's reach, but I'm going to listen to God and I'm going to drop back. I'm going to demote myself and put up David so he can become king ahead of me. I'm going to give up my birthright for him. Lastly, it allowed him to courageously and truly serve God. Now, if you've been a Christian for a while, you know this. If you haven't, I'm so sorry to burst your bubble, but Christianity's hard. And there are going to be so many times when your plan is to head straight and God says, turn right. And that's what's happening in Jonathan's life right now. He wants to walk straight. He wants to be, his life was built up. He's the army. He's the knight. He's ready to go. He's leading them. He's the prince of Israel. He's about to be the king, and he sees David, and God says, that is my king. And so Jonathan was courageously, selflessly able to step down and serve God and serve David. Now this is actually the only original thought that I've had in this whole thing. This is actually my words. Sometimes God's plan isn't our plan, but it's the best plan. And that's true. Sometimes God's plan is scary and it stretches us too thin, but it is way better than anything we could ever imagine. And Jonathan knew that. And that's the only reason why he was able to courageously serve God instead of fearfully run away, as we all do every single day when God changes our plans. So here are a few application questions to kind of think about, not questions, statements that to pull from and to kind of help guide our lives that Pastor Mark John gave us. And so it says, every time you encounter somebody with great potential, you have a choice. You can either pour into them and build them up as leaders, or you can subtract the value of their lives. Now, you think, why would anyone ever subtract the value of someone's lives? But anybody who's hungry for power does it all the time. I mean, think about Saul. What is Saul doing in this? Saul is trying to beat David down, kill him. I mean, he tried to kill him like 37 times. I don't really know the real number, but Saul was trying to kill David because he had great godly potential so that Saul would look better when David was gone. And that it happens subconsciously in our lives all the time. We want, if we can't make ourselves look better, then we have to make others look worse. And I did that in my sophomore career, or my softball career, my freshman and sophomore year. I thought, is if I expose everyone's flaws, then they'll see how great I am and they'll hop on my train. And I didn't know that then, but looking back, that's exactly what I was doing. That's what motives of my heart were. And that led to no greatness of the team. We all just crumpled. And when you decide that you're willing to give everything to somebody and you add value to their lives, it leads to something that's really important. And it's that when you serve somebody, their successes, you share them with them. You share the successes. And I mean, there is nothing greater than that. And I say that only because when you pour into somebody and you give them all you have and you show them what it's like to be in your shoes, what it's like to lead the way you lead, what it's like to serve God and do everything for his glory. And they turn around and share that with somebody else and begin to lead them. I think it's just such an amazing feeling. And I think it's God telling us, hey, this is what you were made for. You were made to get poured into and to pour into somebody else and to show them how to follow me and glorify me. And I think that's God's way of just giving us a little bit of joy in the midst of leading, which is hard. Leading is hard and following God's hard. But seeing somebody finally get it and share it with somebody else is just a beautiful thing. So thank you guys for listening to my ramble. And I hope that you enjoyed it. And I just really, really encourage you to go watch the link, click on the link below and watch the actual sermon, because it is 1,000 times better than I could have ever delivered. Even if I had if I had an hour to do it, he would still do 1,000,000 times better than I would. And so I really encourage you to click on that, and join us back tomorrow as Becca talks about her leader that she's seen throughout scripture. So thank you guys so much, and peace.